Vanity. Vanity, a vanity, a vanity, 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 vanity. It's the most common comment I get from haters on my social media posts. Guys who know I'm Christian and know I'm preaching this message of physical stewardship, but they want to justify their own lack of discipline. And they want to justify, how fat they are and claim that, fitness is just a pursuit of vanity. You're just doing this to elevate yourself. And it's annoying and it's funny, and I'm always tempted to comment back. But here's the truth about vanity. Vanity is a real temptation that we should be righteously fearful of as Christians. And if you're watching this video thinking, I want to make sure that in my fitness journey, I'm pursuing it for the right reasons. I want to make sure I'm not falling into vanity, because I know that can lead to self-destruction. If you're watching this video wanting the right intentions with your fitness, then this is really important to understand. Because you do not want to end up like the guys who are justifying lack of physical stewardship because of fear of vanity. You don't want to end up like them. That's like, people who say, I'm not going to go drive to Starbucks because you could potentially end up in a car crash. It's very dumb. But at the same time, there is a righteous fear of vanity. And when you're pursuing physical excellence as a Christian, it's important to know how to process and how to perceive your pursuit so that you can make sure it's coming from the right place. Because ultimately, if this pursuit is not submitted to the authority of Christ, it will get out of line and it will lead to self-destruction. It absolutely will. And I speak from experience. Again, I'm not saying I've never struggled with this at all. I'm actually coming to you as somebody who, this has been one of my main struggles, one of my greatest struggles in my pursuit of fitness, because it is so easy as you go along this journey to look at yourself and be like, dang, look how good I look. Dang, look how ripped I am. Let me take this selfie, let me post it on Twitter, make sure everybody knows what I'm talking about. Right? It's so easy to do that. It's so easy to look down on people who don't take care of themselves and be like, what's wrong with you? You're so lazy, you're so fat, you're so undisciplined. That's how I used to think about overweight people. But when you're confronted with the fact that you're being vain, it's not just that you've been vain. It's the fact that when you've been vain as a Christian, you're convicted and you start to question if fitness is even worth pursuing at all. Because what's the point if I'm just going to be tempted to vanity? What's the point if I'm going to be liable to self-destruction? I'm better off just not pursuing this, right? I'm better off just, staying in my prayer closet, reading my Bible, and never doing a single bicep curl ever again, right? This is actually exactly what the disciples ask Jesus when Jesus is being questioned about divorce and marriage. And the disciples basically ask Jesus, they're talking about how difficult marriage can be and, why divorce is actually permitted in some cases. And the disciples are like, Jesus, isn't it better than just to not be married? And, Jesus' answer is quite interesting there. He doesn't say yes or no. He basically says that, some people are called to live a certain way and others aren't. And so I'm not here to tell you yes or no. You have to be fit and ripped as a Christian. But I am here to tell you that if the Holy Spirit has given you the conviction that honoring your body is an integral part of your walk with Christ, and that He wants to use your health and fitness to empower you to build His kingdom, then you need to know how to deal with vanity. Because if you don't, it could kill you. So, short story for you guys. When I first met my wife, it was one of the greatest instances where I recognized the potential self-destruction of vanity. Because I was really confident when I first met my wife, extremely confident. In fact, it was that confidence that gave me the conviction to pursue her. See, because my wife, she is kind of the hot girl in town, so to speak, I guess you could say. And I don't mean literally like in town, like in this area of Tennessee. I mean that when I met my wife, I was actually in this business networking trip on a yacht in Croatia, and it was full of all of these relatively high-level entrepreneurs from the Nashville area mainly. And when I met her and I saw her, she was clearly the most beautiful woman at this event, clearly, the prettiest girl on the boat, so to speak, and it was obvious that all of the single guys had their eyes on my wife. And I actually thought it was funny because I was observing her from afar, seeing how she reacted to all of these men pursuing her. And as, the Holy Spirit worked in my heart and, started to reveal to me, you know what, Gabe, that's your wife. I started to think to myself, you know what? I'm better than all these guys. All these guys, I don't care what they have. I don't care what watches they wear. I don't care what their net worth is. I'm better than all these guys. And I had this just intense confidence about me. And my wife would actually tell you today that it's that confidence that she was attracted to. And so anyway, I basically push all these guys to the side and I pursue my wife. And of course I get the girl, right? That's why, we're married here today. And what's interesting is that confidence was so good. And a lot of that confidence came from recognizing who God had made me to be. Like I had the evidence, I had the stack of receipts to be able to look back on and say, you know what? I'm disciplined. Look at how I behave. You know what? I am capable of incredible redemption. Look at the success that I've built in my business. All because of God, all because of what God has done in my life. You know what? I've got Jesus Christ in my spirit. I've got the mind of Christ. If I've got Christ, then there's nothing anyone can do, to compete with me, so to speak, right? I had this intense confidence about me. But here's where that can go wrong. Where that can go wrong is when it's not submitted to the authority of Christ, when it's not submitted to God. When it's not submitted to the proper authority, that's where it can get out of whack. And so there was this season where that confidence turned into self-righteousness, and I started to compare myself to others. I was looking back at all the good things I've done versus the good things that God did in my heart that energized me to take certain actions. And it was more so about me, and how good I was versus how good God had been in my life and the power He's given me. And it was more so about like, look what I can get. I can get the prettiest girl, and look how good I am, versus wow, look what God has given me. And so because that focus became different, I started to become vain. And here's the problem when you become vain. When you become vain, you start to compare yourself to others who are quote unquote worse off than you, or even just slightly behind you in a specific aspect of life, whatever measuring stick you're using. In this case, we're talking about fitness. And my view on overweight people started to become very negative. I'd make videos, maybe you've seen some of the old ones, or maybe you haven't, but videos that would address overweight Christians like, how could you possibly be fat? Christians shouldn't be fat. That's disgusting. That's horrible. And there was still, truth in that, and there was still conviction and love in that at times, but I had leaned so far to this, like, you suck and I'm better than you mindset, and, step it up. And it wasn't really working, which was funny in my marketing, because it wasn't resonating with anybody, because that's not how Christ, serves people, most people. But what was dangerous was, because I had started comparing myself to others, looking down, I also started to compare myself to others looking up. And this is what happens when we become vain. We could think for a moment, you know what? I'm so much better than everyone else, or I'm so awesome. But then when we look up, we're inevitably going to see people who are ahead of us in that domain. And then we're going to look down on ourselves and start to think, you know what? I might suck, actually. And so that's what happened to me. That overwhelming confidence turned to vanity. And now I wasn't just looking down saying, look how good I am. I was looking at people who were more fit than me saying, look how much I suck. Dang. Like, yeah, I thought I was fit, but I'm not that fit. I thought I was disciplined, but I'm not that disciplined. I thought I had experienced some incredible goodness in the area of business, but man, I'm nowhere near where these guys are. I suck. You know what? I might not even be worthy of this incredible woman that God's given me. I don't deserve her. And it starts to turn into these thoughts of self-destruction and self-sabotage. And that's what can happen with your fitness when you turn to vanity. You can get to a place where you feel so good about yourself and you've elevated yourself so high that when the enemy knocks you down, that fall is a far fall, and it freaking hurts when you hit the ground. And you start to think to yourself, is this even worth it? Because if I'm going to fall this hard, if I'm really going to fall this hard, I just let one of my lights fall down because I don't care. I'm feeling this video. But if I'm going to fall this hard, is it even worth it? If I'm going to turn to vanity, the fitter I get, is it even worth it? This is where guys start to get unhealthy in the other way. These are the commenters on the ads and the posts that are like, you know what, they're starting to justify being overweight because they're afraid of vanity. Again, it's a righteous fear. It can be a righteous fear. But we're not meant to stay in that fear as Christians. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, but perfect love casts out all fear. And so it's important to recognize first and foremost when it comes to vanity as a Christian in your pursuit of fitness, that your fitness journey has to be submitted to the authority of Christ. It cannot be something you are doing to elevate yourself, because if you are elevating yourself, you'll ultimately fall and start to question if it's even worth it. And that's where the enemy actually has control. That's where he wins. If he can convince you to just take yourself out of this area of obedience, then he's got you. Now you can be fat, lazy, overweight, and you think it's for the right reasons, and you're less effective in the mission that God's calling you to. And that's a dangerous place to be. That's where a lot of Christian men are, unfortunately, and they feel like it's the right thing. And so what I want to transition to at this point is empowering you to think through your fitness journey in a way where you can still pursue physical excellence, but keep it submitted to Christ. Because there's a few perspective shifts I really had to have at this point in my life to make sure that I wasn't doing this purely for self-elevation. And again, I'm not saying I'm perfect with this. I'm not saying there's never moments where I catch myself in vanity, but obviously I have not given up on health and fitness. Obviously, that moment of, dang, I've been being vain, didn't lead me to say this isn't worth pursuing. Obviously, hopefully you can tell somewhat with this video and me, still wearing a shirt, that I didn't give up on health and fitness. In fact, I've kept off 30 plus pounds over the course of 5+ years, while getting married to my wife, while moving from Florida to Tennessee, while building my business, while becoming a dad. I'm in the highest level of fitness that I've ever experienced, and it's all because of God's goodness and because he wants to tell a story through my fitness, and not for my own selfish gain here. But there's a few perspectives that I had to shift, and I'm going to give you 3 of those here, and I'm going to leave you with these, and I want you to take notes on this if you can, and maybe screenshot those notes or keep those notes pinned at the top of something that you can constantly come back to them when you are thinking through and praying through your pursuit of fitness as a Christian. Okay, so 3 big perspective shifts here. I'm going to start with number 1. The first perspective shift I had to have was that physical excellence wasn't the outcome worth pursuing itself, but physical excellence is actually the side effect of physical stewardship. Physical excellence is the side effect of physical stewardship. It's the natural response to being obedient and honoring my body. And so if I was going to honor my body consistently and do so with diligence, do so with work ethic, do so with discipline, do so with excellence, the natural outcome was that I was going to become very, very fit. Physical excellence is actually an unavoidable natural outcome when you are honoring your body. Okay, and so we are not here thinking, how can I get as ripped as possible? But we are here thinking, how can I honor my body consistently to the glory of God? And what happens is when you do things to the glory of God, you end up in a very high position of excellence. And this is true, across, of course, every area of life, not just fitness. So I'm not just pursuing physical excellence for physical excellence's sake, but I am pursuing physical stewardship, and the natural response is physical excellence. That was one huge perspective shift that allowed me to stay consistent even when I recognized this potential risk of vanity. Second big perspective shift that I had. This one's funny. I have it in my notes as it's okay to be hot. Okay? And I say that with a little bit of intent to make you remember it. But it was the reminder that even though we're not pursuing physical excellence in and of itself, pursuing physical attractiveness in and of itself, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Okay? The reason I know this is because when we look at how King Solomon is described, Solomon is David's son, by the way. He's known as the wealthiest man in the history of the world. as well as the wisest man in the history of the world. He wrote the book of Proverbs, okay? So this is King Solomon. When we look at how King Solomon is described, he's actually described as extremely physically attractive, okay? Described as physically excellent, fit, okay? In Song of Solomon 5:14 through 15, it says this about Solomon. It says, his arms are rods of gold set with jewels. His body is polished ivory, bedecked with sapphires. His legs are alabaster columns set on bases of gold. So King Solomon's arms are rods of gold. Rods of gold are not weak or soft, okay, or frail. His body is polished ivory, smooth, hard, white ivory, not flabby, soft, right? Jello, polished ivory, okay? His legs are alabaster columns set on bases of pure gold. Alabaster columns set on bases of pure gold. That sounds like some strong freaking calves right there. That's what that sounds like. And so this perspective shift of, okay, even though the physical attractiveness, so to speak, isn't my end goal outcome, that doesn't mean it's bad. And it's actually reflective of what God's done in my heart. Again, King Solomon likely wasn't doing bicep curls thinking, you know what, I want to make my arms pillars of gold so that my girl can describe me like this in the book of Song of Solomon. No. But he was likely stewarding his body well. He was likely prepared for battle. He likely was not being gluttonous and slothful and letting his body get weak and frail. And so this is not his goal, his end outcome, but it is a reflection of what God's done in his heart. It is a reflection of his physical stewardship. It is a reflection of his discipline and his drive to be ready for battle, to be effective in what God has called him to. Okay, and so being attractive is actually okay as a Christian. It is not holy to be ugly. It is not holy to be unattractive. It is not holy to be fat, weak, and slow and sloppy. Okay, and it is okay to be extremely attractive as a Christian. That is a reflection, likely, of what God's done in your heart that's energized physical discipline, even if it's not the end goal in and of itself. Okay, so that's okay. Okay. Third big perspective shift here is that we will mess up and that God can still use us when we mess up. And this one is good because just because you've watched this video doesn't mean you're never going to struggle with vanity again. And just because I've had these perspective shifts doesn't mean I'm never going to struggle with vanity again. There's even been moments in just filming this video where I've said things and I'm like, Holy Spirit, was that self-elevation? Was that vanity? And that's going to happen naturally. And there are going to be moments where you catch yourself being like, dang, I am being so self-focused right now. Okay, that's going to happen. But us stumbling doesn't disqualify us from God using us. Us stumbling does not disqualify us from God using us. Let's look at, someone like Peter, for example, right? Peter, this is the guy who denied Jesus 3 times, stumbled in an extremely significant way, and God still used him. Okay, we can look at King David, somebody who stumbled in a very significant way. He's probably feeling pretty vain, pretty self-elevated when he, slept with this guy's wife and then had this guy killed. Right? He's probably like, I'm king. Look at all the good things I've done, all the men, all the enemies I've slain. I can have whatever I want. Right? He was probably thinking something along those lines. And that didn't disqualify him. God still used him. Now, that's not to say that there are not natural consequences that take place when we are not submitted to God. And there are natural consequences to that vanity. Again, like the fall, when you're that high up in your own head, the fall hurts. The fall is hard, but that still doesn't disqualify you. And so, although we should have a righteous fear of vanity, that shouldn't stop us from pursuing obedience, which results in physical excellence. See, because you cannot avoid getting in incredible shape and looking really good when you're honoring your body. It is the natural outcome, and I think we need to be more familiar with the fact that as Christians, that it is possible that we end up looking good when we pursue health and fitness. And we shouldn't be offended when we see a physically attractive Christian. There's nothing modest about being fat and not taking care of your body. Okay? If anything, that's prideful. It's saying, look at me, I'm so holy. I don't do something as vain as training my body. Okay? And so I hope that these perspective shifts really serve you. And I just want to remind you again that God has given you the power of self-control. And you can have the self-control to not turn to vanity when you're pursuing this physical stewardship, when you are becoming extremely, extremely good looking in your fitness journey. It is possible to have authority over your thoughts in this area as you become more fit, and you don't have to be a slave to these temptations. And the fear of these temptations definitely don't have to, knock you out of the line of obedience. So if God's calling you to this, then step into it with confidence. Know that there's grace for you when you slip up, and understand that the physical excellence that follows is the natural outcome of your physical stewardship. And that's good. That can be done to the glory of God. I hope this blesses you. See you on the next one.